Hello. We have recording in progress. That means we've begun. I hope everyone is.
I don't see it as that.
Good evening.
Hi, Dr. Evan. Um,
I don't see record. I see a button for me to start recording
okay.
when we're
I
ready.
think it just said recording in progress, so I didn't know if that
Interesting.
they,
Okay.
they can cut it out if need be at the beginning of the
I
video.
hope so.
Good,
Yeah.
Jesse, good.
I think
Hi,
it
Yusra.
shows recording. Hi, I can see on mine.
Yep,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I had to start the session in order to let folks in. So,
exactly. It's what you have to do. As if people are on the outside and not in the in with the rest of it. So that's good. Good evening, everyone. Hello. Good to see. Some people have seen more than once tonight, which is really nice. So I will. We have. We're. Who are we waiting on? We're waiting on Mickey and all. So I imagine she will come in as soon as she can. Uh, and so hello, Maya. Hello, Yusra, Jesse, and Haley again. You know, I will call the meeting to order since it is 7:30. So good evening. I would like to call the meeting of the Curriculum and Student Success Committee of the Portland Board of Public Education to order at 7:30 on May 11th. And we are meeting online via Zoom. I am Julianne Opperman, Chair of the committee, District 3 Rep, and we already have committee member Lena and committee member Yusra Ali. Uh, and we are waiting on Vice Chair Bondo at that point. The presentation tonight is pretty hefty. It is a presentation on special ed services, but also a special presentation on the status of the grading system across the district and in the study that's been going. So that both of those will be very, very interesting. So with that, I will check to see, do we have anyone in who wishes to to speak in attendees?
so I don't see anyone with their hand up for public comment.
I don't either. I see. And I so wait a minute, see if anybody else is going to pop in really fast. No. Okay, so we'll close public comment. And now you have the floor, Dr. Proctor.
Thank you. So this evening, as you said, Chair Upperman, we're going to pick up where we left off in essence with the last meeting. I recognize that we ran short on time, and so what we will do is do a very brief recap of some of the topics for special education, and then we will move over into discussion regarding our special education topics. So, as you see on the agenda, again, we're going to do our special education update, continue for discussion, particularly in this area, and then we'll move on to our grading task force update. We do have a brief update to share as well there. And then, so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jesse Applegate, who will continue the conversation with special education and the updates from our last study and progress we're making towards study findings and recommendations. Jesse?
Great. Thank you, Dr. Proctor. It's great to be with everybody this evening. I wanted to make sure committee knows that I'm also being joined tonight by Sarah Rent, who's our elementary director of special education. So she will also be on hand to help me talk through some of this and answer questions that you have. So as Dr. Proctor shared, we do have a short presentation. recognizing last month we were a bit short on time, so kind of going to summarize and make sure clearly sort of explain where we've been and where we're going. And then certainly want to leave plenty of time to, I know that the committee has some questions sort of connecting back to the original special education study that was done last year and sort of how this work is connecting and moving that forward. And so while I will speak to that a bit in the presentation now, certainly happy to answer any questions that folks have about that. Okay, so with that said, I'll go ahead and get started here. So sort of looking at this past year, our work really has been about setting and creating the conditions for the achievement of students with IEPs. Sort of put another way, kind of laying the foundations, right? And so we focused, as I've shared many times now, in sort of 4 key areas. And those areas, to make the point, really come directly from the DM group study and sort of what they identified as high leverage areas based on their study and based on feedback and the data that we were going through at the time. And so again, those areas were around professional development, building manageable structures for ensuring that staff have information and training they need to successfully serve their students. Another area was specialized programming, laying out clear concept for each program and establishing consistent practices across them. We had IEPs and service delivery. So we were creating data systems and practices within special education to inform our work. And then we also had our last area of focus was family engagement, developing a culture of sharing information proactively with parents and of incorporating parent feedback into decision making. So those were the 4 areas that we focused on this year. And again, this year was about laying some important foundations, and I'm going to talk about how that went. Just also wanted to share some additional context, though, and I spoke to this a bit at the board meeting a month or so ago when we talked about sort of the work that our team does day to day, and just wanted to mention that context of the central team needing to balance our strategic plan work, right, with the ongoing support and oversight that we need to provide to schools. And that, again, the DM study, I think, really clearly showed staff asking for more of that. So just to say that, we continue to see growth of students with IEPs. We seem to be seeing growth in terms of the needs of students. That's a data point that we're working on and refining, but that seems to be what we're seeing. And our teams really needing support navigating through these challenging situations that occur, sort of helping them follow the right practices and procedures. And so our teams, I just want to say that, our team is always balancing that, right? How we are really super closely engaged with our school teams and how we are supporting them as like our top priority. And then also being able to step back and do the strategic work. And that's something that we think about, how much time we can dedicate to both. So with that context, though, I think we had some really important successes this year. And I'm going to move to the next slide here. So just to go through it kind of by area, right? So in terms of professional development, we were able to train 171 staff and leaders in CPI, which is our de-escalation training framework. It also is the framework that is used in our programs for physical management when needed, but the focus of it is de-escalation. And so we have a team now at every school, and in a number of our highest needs programs, most folks who work in that program are trained, right? So 171 is a lot of staff across the district. So we're really proud of being able to get that out, and also having a sustainable model going forward where we're training in-house instead of contracting it out. So that's something we look forward to maintaining. We've also been able, now that we have Sarah and her counterpart secondary in place, really been able to use our special ed coordinator model to deliver training, special ed training in general, to school teams more effectively by kind of using a train the trainer model. And I'm sure Sarah can speak more to that in a bit here. But just to say that having the directors in place this year has allowed us to do that. Um, in terms of the specialized programming, we sort of finally really set the essential features of each program, right? Identifying each of the specialized programs, Breathe, Beach, FLS, what their key elements are. And we established this walkthrough process, which I've spoken to and shared some data from, as both to ensure the consistency across the programs, but also to establish the practice. So it's something that we can be using and we will be using in the future as we implement, say, more curriculum in these programs. So that's really exciting that we've set up that framework. Go to the next slide, please. In terms of IEPs and service delivery, this is really our data piece. And I have to say, this has been a huge step forward for us. A year ago, we just simply really did not have any kind of data culture in special ed. We were looking, we were able to pull individual student data, and of course, teams would be looking at individual students, but looking at anything really in the aggregate was not something we had the capacity, ability to do. We certainly have a lot to still build out, but with our new program manager in place, we have been pulling and sharing data on a wide range of IEP data, a wide range of data related to IEPs, I should say. So from sort of compliance with timelines, right, and things of that nature. Simply, we hadn't been able to really do that before. And so being able to share these things with our teams, the coordinators and our teams on a regular basis to ensure that we're, meeting those compliance deadlines, to ensure that we have the right information in the IEPs is a really, really big step. There's a lot more that we can do, though, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit related to some other IEP pieces. But I think that, again, just establishing it this year was a huge lift and a really big step for us. And then the last piece, just on family engagement, just want to mention that, we've now held 3 parent U sessions on special education that were sort of, about sharing really fundamental information with families, something that we will certainly be continuing in years to come, I think, sort of as a foundational thing. Like I said, we also, one of those sessions in particular focused on guidance for families on how to engage in the IEP process. And that's something that we think is particularly important. So continuing to support families as they engage with their school teams on the IEP process. So those are some things that, again, really feel good about, really successful this year, laying those foundations. Certainly in the same areas, we have plenty of room for growth, and we want to be really transparent and clear about that. So professional development, right? We continue to get feedback around differentiating it more by staff experience, by specific program assignment. We've taken some steps, but we agree we aren't doing enough in those areas and want to get more sort of differentiated. Also, opportunities for staff to connect with colleagues outside of their own school and outside of their own program. While it's a complex thing to schedule, it's going to be a real focus for us because when we've been able to do it, we've gotten great feedback from staff, and we really feel that these kind of professional learning communities that we could create would be really valuable. So that's something else around that. For the specialized programs, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit here, but more specialized curriculum. So in other words, there's the sort of fundamental aspects of the program, but then there's also the actual curriculum and instruction that's happening and how we can really support staff more in differentiating that for the students in these programs. And then also sort of program-specific guidance on strategies and approaches that staff can take, and what we envision this looking like will be, and we've been working on and we'll be rolling out to staff next year, is really a program-specific handbook for each program. So really kind of wide range of information and resources if you're a member, staff member in that program, that you'll get, and that will also sort of then facilitate alignment as well. So we're really excited about next steps there. Other areas for growth, just to say on the next slide. So like I mentioned, we love what we're doing with data, have a ton more to do. In the DM report, they spoke they looked a lot at sort of services in IEPs and how those are written and the consistency or lack thereof. Same with IEP goals, and are those aligned to student services? Those are all data points that we could potentially be, again, looking at and monitoring and tracking at a broader level. There's a lot of work to be done to get to that, but we are doing that, right? So those structures that we put in place, we want to expand them so that it includes work on goals, work on services, how we can really look at and see what's happening across the district in those important areas too. So that's a really important thing we're going to be doing, and then also building more tools that will make the data accessible to staff and leaders. So again, we've been building it. We have spreadsheets and things like that. We have some consistent practices around sending it out, but we're looking to build, and akin to work that the data team is doing all the time. Build tools that are more user friendly that can be better accessed by staff and leaders. So we have some work in that area. And then around family engagement, the big move that we're doing, and we shared this at the last Parent University, is we're getting ready to establish a parent advisory committee, a district-wide parent advisory committee that will serve as sort of a connector between the district and parents. We think that this will really be a driver of, more family engagement, and also, it's a practice that is actually required in many states or many places. It's not in Maine, but for special education specifically, but we think it's something that's really important for Portland to have, and so we are getting ready to solicit interest in that, and then put that together for next year. So that's a big piece too. Okay, great. So that's the work in those areas. And so then the last piece I just want to share before I want to, give time for questions is, I've said a couple times that this year was really like foundational work that we're doing. It's aligning with the DM group study, but it is sort of building those foundations. Thinking about our initiative 2.5, the focus of that initiative is really on instruction and universal design for learning and making sure that students are able to access the curriculum. And that's really the path to closing that achievement gap. So with that in mind, while we're going to continue all of the foundational pieces that I spoke about, and we need to continue doing that, we also, in terms of our strategic focus for next year, are really going to be shifting more toward instruction and curriculum and really making that the focus. So we're going to be continuing literacy intervention that we've been, Orton Gillingham and some other literacy intervention that we've been working on in like sort of the resource level, and not just resource, but across the district, as well as math intervention, with the goal of really giving teachers the tools they need to push students on reaching their IEP goals and accessing the curriculum. We're also going to be rolling out some new curriculum in our programs as well. So we have something new specifically for the beach program. And then you've hopefully heard of Character Strong, which is already in use in the district. And we're going to be using the higher tier versions of that in our Breathe program next year to really hone in on the social emotional learning for students. So again, it's going to be about giving sort of consistent tools to staff to be using across the continuum of services, from resource to specialized programming, and really pushing that instructional curricular piece. And that's sort of where we're headed for next year. And again, I think that's really clearly spoken to in the DM study as well. It's sort of the natural outgrowth, and it connects to the strategic plan. So we're excited to move that forward. So with that said, Dr. Proctor, that was really what I had, and I wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for, any questions and that people had.
Thank you, Jesse.
Yeah.
And I'll pause here so that we can kind of go back and take some questions. I'll turn it over to Chair Opperman to guide us through the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Proctor. Well, I see many questions appearing, and I would start with Member Lena. Would you care to speak and ask them?
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Jesse. I am wondering, there was on one of the slides you mentioned that you're encouraging staff to visit other schools in the district, do observations. I think that's great. I think it's really valuable. I was just wondering, since there was a second bullet below it specifically about specialized programs, like did that include the specialized programs teachers being able to have the opportunity to observe in other schools as well?
Absolutely. Yes, I
Okay,
was thinking about that at all parts of the continuum for sure.
perfect. Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And then I was also just wondering how well were the parent university sessions attended? How well attended were they?
Yeah, so we had something like 32 attendees at the first one, which was in person on like the first super cold day of winter, as I recall. It was a very encouraging turnout. The second one we held had to be virtual due to the situation with ice that was happening at the time. We had something like 21 attendees for that. Our most recent one was lower attended. We only had a handful of attendees, unfortunately. I'm not sure why. But I would say that overall, for establishing it for the first time, I'm glad we were able to get some good numbers. Certainly something we want to grow, though. Not really satisfied with it, but as a starting point, you know.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Set? Vice Chair Bondo.
Thank you. Thank you, Jesse. Bear with me. I have 4 questions, 4
Of
big
course.
ones. And yes, my first question is that I think is one on the earlier side about the increase of the IEPs overall students.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, do we have some of those explanations, some of the reason? And also, I want to see if it's those increases mostly elementary school or secondary or high school. That's some of the clarity that I want to know. And if we have done some research to look at the post-COVID to see if it was something related to the post-COVID, like an early intervention gap, then we have see between 2020 to 2022 for those students preschool during that time. So I just wanted to see, because it's not something, and I'm so happy to see a lot of students in high Ps, and I really want for them to be mostly on the mainstream. So did we find any of those reasons or something related to the
Yeah.
increase? Yes.
Thank you. So I would say that I don't think I don't really have a one, compelling reason why. I'd love to look at the data and get a little more granular for you to, in terms of elementary versus secondary. But I
Okay.
will say that just generally speaking, we are seeing growth, I would say, at all grade levels. Certainly, incoming kindergarteners for the last couple years, we've seen a very high number of students coming in compared to previous years, uh,
Okay.
where the determination from the team is for like a specialized type program, self-contained class. That those numbers have really shot up, but we're also seeing more referrals, really at every grade span, including at high school. So it's hard to say what's driving that.
Mhm.
Certainly, I think it's connected to COVID in some way, um, but I'm not sure that I can really speak confidently to like one thing. I will though get some more sort of broken down data for you though about those numbers at the different grade spans.
Okay,
We've looked,
please.
we've looked in aggregate, but not at the grade span kind of level.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
Okay. So now my second question is related to the multilingual students, the IPs on the multilingual students. So I always, for years now, having a lot of families calling me, meeting me, and asking me why they see the kids going to the IEPs, or so that means it's too on those special education that they just don't understand at all the way we do the assessment on the IEPs, and also why is a lot of their kids are being identified as on the autism spectrum. So my question is this on the social emotion is the way we are assessing the multilingual to try to understand the IPs if we have to move them the IPs. Are we paying attention to the language acquisition versus to the learning disabilities? or are we respecting the student cultural and linguistic identity, secondly? And I want to understand if we're paying attention to the level of the student proficiency in the native language. And then the fourth one, we want to understand if the language instruction, then we have, if we pay attention to the language instruction between the gap of the education where they're coming from. So how are we defining during those assessments? Because it's been so tricky to me being in the education system for years and having some degree there to understand that if a child is speaking really fluent on their own language and reading on their own home language and coming here, becoming an IPs. So I just wanted to understand those four categories I just describing to understand the way we're doing the assessment for our multilingual students. Yeah, Jess.
Absolutely. Well, I think I'll answer this the best way I can, and you let me know if you have a follow-up question to this. But what I would say is we've done, led by our special ed multilingual coordinator, really a lot of work in developing and then training staff around the referral and assessment process for multilingual students, because there are, I mean, you're speaking to it, right? A number of factors you need to take into consideration when you're thinking about, is what we're seeing from the student actually coming from being caused by a disability, or are there other factors that are, at play here? So, and again, it's not just that we've developed new materials, though we have done that, but we have done substantial training over, several years now with staff around this. And we continue to work closely with teams on it. So I do think that there is a practice in the district of taking those things into consideration. It's hard to speak to how consistent that is, though. And so I don't know if there's certain areas or pockets where we struggle more with that. But it is certainly an expectation that we have, that teams are discussing those, and that's explicitly part of, again, our referral process. It's written into it, and all that. So we certainly are doing that. It's also true that the percentage of students, of multilingual students with IEPs, has been, slightly increasing in recent years. So, it's something that we're monitoring, but it's also an area where we have done a lot of work. So I see the tension in that for sure. Something we continue to work on. But I guess the last piece I would say is just that, when a student is referred, a multilingual student is referred, the ESOL teacher is always a part of that team. And so, as I mean, obviously many folks are part of it who work with the student, but this is done with the consultation of experts who know about language acquisition and sort of know what would be expected, right, or what we could reasonably expect from a student, et cetera. So that's also part of the process.
I'm going back to my education stage. When I was in Belgium, there's a French speaking area. And most of the time when we've been doing a lot of assessment and cultural bias. So I just wonder if we are using those kind of tools as assessment for cultural bias when we're talking around assessing multilingual. Because this is really important, because we cannot make an assessment using its own one specific language of judgment. So I'm just wondering on those tools, because you mentioned on the slide 6 and 7, I think they have a professional development, I think, to try to define, adding more capacity. So I'm just wondering about the tools that we have. Those are tools are cultural biased or not? If you don't have a question now, I can just wait to get those questions, because, I really need to start spending a little more time, Dr. Proctor, because this is something is really affecting my community. And most of the parents been affecting for years, because they're bringing the kids here later And they really find the kids are speaking home with a different language and reading. But when they've been assessing in our program here in our program, they've been moving to IPs. And then most of them, they just don't understand the process. So this has come back to me when Member Lina just asking about, the participation on the university, on the U universities, that the number of those parents, they are not reflecting the number, the demographic of the parents, the multilingual families. So that means, how can we do better to make sure that we doing the best outreach possible to make those families understand the process? Because most of them, they just don't know exactly how we deciding that the child has a disability versus just learning the language and going to the ELD, like, the language development support.
Yeah.
So this is an area I'm so concerned, and I've been concerned for years. And that's exactly why I went to JC and Dr. Warren to the DMI last year in February. And we've been to the special education program, and I've been asking a lot of questions. I'm so glad the DMI team, they came to Portland and do those assessment and recommendation. But the thing is, I keep all the time wondering what we have done before, which one was what kind of assessment and accomplishment we have done before the DMI made their new recommendation. So maybe I mix a lot of my language here, but this is just a big concern for me if we don't use any assessment tool with more cultural bias here.
Yes, and I think we can for part of the question and discussion that we're having this evening, where we don't have information, we could include it in an update to the board, specifically the question around the breakdown of the increase in special education eligibility and assignment, and to break it down by grade level. And then I would love to, offer that data where we can see if there's a intersection between students who are multilingual being referred, and try to see where we have data available. What Jesse noted, and it is another point of information, is that also we're still building data systems where there was none before, where we did not have access to perhaps some of this information. So we're happy to follow up with added information and more detail in our update to the board this week.
Yeah, and I would love to know what kind of assessment we're using,
Yeah.
because the culturally bias is just what I feel like, is the most used for those are especially American special education system versus to what the national stage like European and other countries are using, to make sure that we really making sure when we identifying the student, we really identify the student versus the learning the language
That's right.
versus the disability. So
Yeah.
something then the community has been having a lot of concern, and
Yeah.
yeah, me too.
Yeah, I would love to offer again some follow-up to that, because it would be really interesting to understand, to share with the board our process and where we find where we accommodate the process by, for example, providing assessment to students in their native language to ensure that they are able to respond prior to being identified as needing an IEP. So we'll follow
Okay.
up with the board.
Thank you so much. That's all my question. Thank you,
Uh,
Chair.
Certainly. I have a question or two, and it's mostly related to acuity and the IEP, the clarity. I know that was one of the big things. When I sat in and listened, I was to the DM when they did the presentation, and I was looking over the slides again. That there were gaps in there, and there was a concern about the language used to describe needs, disabilities and needs was kind of fluid. And I think you mentioned that you're making tools, and I wondered how you are how is the change and development among the IEP groups across the district becoming more consistent in how they articulate the different stages in the IEP? I mean, that was all very new to me and it was fascinating, but how is that coming along? I mean, what's, at what stage is it, I guess?
Sure. Well, I kind of, I think there's sort of two different pieces to that. So one of the issues that DM Group identified was that we were incredibly inconsistent on how we were documenting just services for students. I think we all remember those numbers. Yeah, and so we have spent dedicated a good deal of time, our leadership team, in consultation with the coordinators, on sort of trying to get down to what is a sort of finite set of services, right? That we can sort of say, these are the services that are available in the district. It's still, it's still many, but it's finite. And just not to get too technical on it, but like in Acuity, like literally going into being able to go to a drop-down menu, right? And click on it so that we can control how the data is created and therefore, analyze it better. We're certainly not where we want to be yet, because Acuity, unfortunately, it's widely used across the state by special ed departments. It's when it comes to using it for sort of pulling aggregate data versus individual data, it is not the best system. And so we are struggling to sort of get that concept of this finite number of services implemented literally into the system to clean up the data. So we're still sort of figuring out what we're going to do going into next year. We have the concepts, we have the premise of what the services are, but the technical piece of how do we get it consistent within Acuity is not as straightforward as we would have liked. We're having some development challenges and stuff with them. So I'll continue to update the board on that piece, but
Yep.
We are on sort of on the right track to start, but we aren't there technically yet, is how I would answer it. We have put out guidance to teams though, so we are doing that. I think the other part of your question has to do maybe with the quality of, like how people are talking about student needs in terms of IEP goals and, in their present levels of performance and things. And I wonder, Sarah, if you want to speak maybe a little bit to just sort of work we've done with the teams this year around those pieces.
Yeah, sure. So part of my role is to help develop the like role PD that we have each month. And so Jesse had mentioned that's been a train the trainer type of model. So I develop it with the secondary director, and then we train the coordinators on the slides, but and then they bring all the special ed teachers together on one Wednesday a month for PD. And much of the topic has been exactly how you progress monitor students. What's the exact progress monitoring tool to get the students exact present level we want to use for reading, writing, math? How do we exactly want to label it? Like Jesse's talking about, we're going to be clear on the labeling. What types of data gets you, 30 minutes in the special ed setting? What types of data, if you're closer to grade level, might be an in-class support service where someone's going in to help you in the inclusive classroom. So we've done a lot of training on exactly, looking at your academic data, what's that telling you for student needs, specific training on how to write a quality IEP goal, and then trying to align your service minutes, if that makes sense, with, with the data. And then we've also done some training around functional goals, which I think is a little bit is a growth area for us. We do have some, I think, foundational academic curriculum and progress monitoring tools. Jesse mentioned we're going to be bringing on some more tiers of Character Strong, which has more lessons for all of those functional goals that are part of IEPs: social skills, emotional skills, executive function skills. So that's definitely an area we're going to lean into. We're going to lean more into the academics too, with some new math curriculum, but also looking at those functional skills and using that Character Strong curriculum to really make sure we're getting students quality IEP goals and quality services connected to their needs, because many of our IEP students, it's not just academic needs, or some of them have both academic and functional needs, and some of our IEP students only have those functional needs. So um, every month we keep coming back to these conversations of building a quality IEP based on the feedback we got from the DM group report.
What are the teachers asking for in PD?
Definitely, I mean, at the elementary level, when I went around, I've only been here since July, and math is definitely, I feel like, a gap. They didn't feel like they had a strong math intervention. So that's something we've quickly gotten on, and we had a bunch of pilot interventions out this year. And actually, the Friday, the math committee is getting back together to decide on the math intervention that we'll use in resource room next year, K-8. So that was an area of need. I do think teachers are asking for functional curriculum. Like, so, we go to an IEP and they have all these social skills needs or executive function needs, but like now when they come to visit me in the special ed classroom, what do I do? What do I teach? So trying to give them more tools in that area. Yeah, I think that just more support so they don't feel like they're having to create their own lessons, that we have core curriculum and core assessments, and that they have a bank of resources to go to.
That sounds good. I don't know how many teachers you've been able to, have you got to all of the teachers at this point, at least in elementary?
So, I mean, I'm probably in each school each week. And so I meet closely with the coordinators, but I also attend a lot of the special ed team meetings, which are with the special ed teachers. So I do feel like I've had a lot of visibility and FaceTime with the teachers.
Good. I'm just wondering, listening into Vice Chair Bondo's questions and then kind of thinking of it even beyond broader scheme of of our IEPs, whether they're, executive function, simple, low, moderate to, extreme. Have you got a sense yet in the data of how expanded it is, which particular needs are greater at what, do we have a lot of kids who are have executive function, or do we have a lot of kids and with the math situation? Is that a math situation that because all the teachers are having difficulty with math, or is that, even the regular ed teachers, or is this a function of, a real, I don't know what the name for numeracy issues in special ed is, but is it really a special ed issue, or is it more of an RTI issue? I guess that was, I used to call it RTI. That's what we used to call it when I was teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know Jesse in one of these presentations, he had a slide, and we can get it back to the board, that gives you the breakdown of the disability category with the highest number. I believe it's specific learning disability, but correct me if I'm wrong, Jesse. So all of our students, because they go through evaluation, sure, they may have an academic challenge, and it's always hard to tease out where that gap came from. Did they get the correct intervention pre-referral? But they all do have the testing that shows they have a processing disorder, right? So there's like a cognitive also reason why they might struggle with math or literacy skills. Another large category, I believe, is our other health impairment category, which tends to be our children with that category is often used for our ADD or ADHD students. So like that's just by the nature of the disability, they do struggle with executive functioning and often need more support in that area. Often very bright, but need more support, like for all of those kind of student skills to focus and organize themselves to be ready to get core curriculum. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
No, you are.
Okay.
I'm understanding this. I taught for a while. And in fact, you brought up a question I have, which I think is a discussion that's going on in another committee meeting. Member Lena might bring this up, but the fact that you can have someone that might, under special ed, be in a gifted identification, but have another particular issue, and how does that get balanced out? Was a question I had. So, it's not.
Yeah, and that actually, comes up. I've been involved in multiple case consults this year where that comes up. Often our students, it's not always a disability, but often you might have students on the autism spectrum disorder that are really, really bright, and have really gifted areas. But socially still need a lot of support or regulating maybe their emotions. So, we definitely do see that where kids are able to access Chapter 104, but also um, do need accommodations and support from a special ed teacher. So it's not common, but I mean,
No,
a lot of
I
families will refer to it as twice exceptional.
yeah.
So there is quite a lot of research out there, and so we do try to support both needs.
The one and I'm sorry, yeah. Another question I have about is not the special ed teacher, but how is the interaction, I mean, with the regular ed teacher? Because again, accommodations and modifications, all those things, how are they being, what needs are they having and how are we meeting those needs?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I would, I think I would say that, and when you look at the DM group study again, that collaboration piece, which I think is part of what you're speaking to, just in terms of the general ed teacher having time with special educators, and I would say also with ESOL teachers too, just as that's a challenge we have in both areas, right? Is certainly a growth area for us. We've been doing. Um, we've been doing some work to get our hands around scheduling a bit, because it's sort of that holistic piece where we have to make it all fit together and provide more time um, for staff to collaborate so that they can really um, be working together around the needs of the specific students in the class or what have you. So that's one piece of it. And then the other is, I think professional development for general education teachers as well on these topics. And that is an area where we have not been doing that consistently. And so it's certainly something that we would like to get into place. That's not to say that general ed teachers aren't knowledgeable about these things, aren't
No,
working
no, they get
well,
one class.
but
They
just
get,
right. But just to say, like, those are certainly, you've identified some growth areas for sure,
yeah,
I would say.
yeah, they get one class. I'm finished asking. I appreciate all the answers and the clarity. Does anyone else have any more questions before we go on to the next topic? I don't see any. Can't see everybody's hands here and there. No. Well, I appreciate all of you. It was nice to meet you, Sarah Rent. It's good it for all of us just to know how all those people that are doing all this work, just like in the last committee meeting I was in, all the finance people that nobody knows what they do, and it's also the other people in the different levels that it's good to hear what you do, and so thank you very much. Appreciate it, and Dr. Proctor, it's all yours now again.
Okay, so what we'll do is thank you so much for to Jesse and Sarah and the team that supported the presentation coming together. Thank you so much for your questions around special education. And what we'll transition to now is just an update from the grading task force. And I will turn it over to Haley and Allison, who will provide some information about where we are currently.
Thank you very much. And I'll try to keep it succinct since some of this is a bit of a refresher. But just as a refresh on sort of how we got to this point. It all really started with an investigation that the data team was doing, looking at grading data, and I feel like it was like a sweater with a pill that I couldn't help but pick. And then I started pulling and pulling and pulling, and then the sweater started to unravel. So I feel like the deeper we get into this work, the more nuanced our understanding becomes, but also the more complex the problem becomes. And so we started this conversation really by talking about how our grading system especially at the high school level, where there's such variability in how our grading structure is set up, where we have different grading scales, different cadences of assigning credit throughout the year. But this creates a lot of issues for our data systems, particularly as we try to stand up a data dashboard, but also in terms of thinking about monitoring our data system wide. And so that was sort of the problem statement that I brought to this group this winter. And so the issue of inconsistent grading practices or a lack of normalized grading practice, we pointed to some really key challenges to overcome. That this creates an ineffective data system, and it makes it hard for us to talk about or look at our data systematically. The lack of shared norms, where we may be holding students potentially to different standards of mastery or proficiency across buildings, and how this can contribute to potential inequities, and that students' experiences may vary based on the building that they attend, and then the operational inefficiency of it all, that ultimately this puts a lot of burden on our data systems and our data team to do manual corrections on this. But this story of lack of standardization, it scales to all systems, right? It's not just about grading policy, but really lack of standardization across multiple systems that we have create inefficiencies and create opportunities for inequity. And so that's sort of where we are on our journey, is that we started with grading, but we're in a little bit different place than we expected to be. And so in order to prepare to launch this grading task force, the data team, of course, started digging more deeply into Infinite Campus and looking at the technical side. But I realized as I started to identify potential stakeholders to engage in this work, that the complexity of our system was even more complex than was immediately apparent. And so Alison Dame was kind enough to connect with me and really start thinking about how we might engage in a conversation about the grading system. And we sort of opened a Pandora's box, because we realized that as we started to talk about our grading system, there was an implication for our schedules as well. Because as I mentioned, not only do we use different grading scales, A, B, C, D, or 1 to 4, but we also are assigning credit for classes on different cadences. And so we have one high school where courses run for half-year terms versus courses that run year-long, and we have credits that are assigned on a quarterly basis in one building, once at the end of the year in another building, and twice a year in another. So this made us realize that in many ways, the grading system is inherently tied to our structure. We also realized that there's a little bit of a historical precedent for this conversation that predates me personally, but back in 2022, there was actually a board resolution that called for this alignment across our high schools and explicitly named schedules as one area to try to build alignment across our buildings. And so I think our realization is we wanted to have a grading task force, but we realized in order to do this that we actually have to talk about schedules and grading together because they are so closely tied. And so our work to sort of bring together this task force, I think we realized that we actually had to think a little bit differently about the scope of the work. But we also realized that this work has deep implications for our strategic plan. While I certainly I don't want to speak on behalf of the strategic initiative leads on each of these areas, but we identified that there are actually multiple strategic initiatives that are directly impacted by this lack of alignment in our schedules. And so, for me, thinking about our data dashboards and strategic initiative 5.1, the inconsistency in our schedules and our grading systems makes it difficult to have an effective data dashboard. And this is playing out as we are working right now, specifically on our ninth grade on-track dashboards. For our HQMI initiatives, strategic plan 2.3. One challenge we have in having inconsistent schedules is really that we have different numbers of instructional minutes and opportunities for collaboration across staff. And so, I think that lack of alignment in the schedule structure makes it harder for us to achieve the goals set out in that initiative. For our special ed team, based on the recommendation of the secondary network team, that the co-teaching model that was actually recommended by the DMG group specifically mentioned that dedicated teacher collaboration time. And again, having inconsistent schedule structures makes it harder to do that work. The same recommendation came from the ESOL study. And so again, this idea of being able to have that common planning time, we need to make sure that we have a schedule structure that enables that. And lastly, the ninth grade work, not only for the teachers' common planning time, but also for the data team supporting that work. Allison, do you have anything you want to chime in with as I sort of voice over? It's very high level, but big picture. It creates a lot of challenges that permeate multiple areas.
No, you did a great job, and I can add more detail based on the board's questions.
Thank you. So we are in a different place than we thought we were going to be, but even though it's not exactly where we thought we would be, we feel like we now have a deeper understanding of the complexity of this work and really what the work actually needs to be. And so our revised plan at this point in time is really to go back to that original 2022 board resolution and help us use that as a grounding point to remind ourselves, that work has been underway since 2022, but that we have to continue to make efforts on that mandate and potentially expand the scope, though grading was not explicitly named in that original resolution, that we think grading is sort of part of that broader effort to create alignment across our high schools. And so our sort of shifting objectives for this year are really focusing on bringing together high school leaders with strategic plan leads to look at the challenges that we're trying to solve for and figure out how can we build a shared vision for high school experience. I think that the strategic plan as it's currently written did not exist in 2022. And so I think that there's an opportunity to sort of realign. We also, this work is already underway, but really focusing on an artifact review and looking at, so what do we already know about our structural and technical challenges? And so the work that the data team has already been doing, but then engaging with the secondary network team from their experiences as well, and synthesizing those findings. And then ideally still, bringing forward a draft initial recommendation for a more aligned schedule and grading structure that then we can seek broader input. So we realize that we need to start with a smaller group of individuals who are really close to this work and understand the potential practical implications of making shifts in our practice before we engage a broader set of stakeholders to seek input. And then sort of ultimately, it's grading and schedule. So sort of broadening the scope to really get at some of the root cause challenges that we're facing and trying to overcome in this work. So that is where we are at this point in time. Any questions?
Member Lena, please go ahead.
Thanks so much. Haley, I have a question about the resolution. This predates me. I was just reading through it. My understanding of reading through it is that it is more directed on basically coming up with a plan to apply for, the funding for the high school consolidation. I'm not sure how it pertains to the grade. I guess my question is I don't know, I don't understand why it changes your plans with the grading task force. Can you just explain that a little bit deeper? Thanks.
Sure. And Allison, you should feel free to jump in. I think, oh, did you want to go, Allison?
No, sorry, I'm just pulling it up as well, Memberlina. So if you look at the fifth paragraph, um, sorry, I'm going between screens. Um, so we had data based on a 2019 bar and aspects of the school, such as, and then you get a list that starts with schedules. So transitions for ninth graders, we went on to use the bar foundation money to build out our ninth grade teaming structures. Obviously, special education program, we just heard about the work that we're doing there. And then, Initiative 2.6 was born out of that, services for students who are language learners. But schedule is one that didn't get sort of like assigned a team to work on it.
If I could pop it, this is a piece of the high school of the future work, isn't it, Allison? It seems to be. It was predates
Right.
me.
So
Mhm. So I think yes and yes, it is a part of the high school of the future work, but not to view it as um, we have to build the practice now, and create the conditions now in terms of scheduling so that when we do get to that particular slice of the work, but another slice of the work that is very uh, current and relevant in our strategic plan is also the work that we're doing around ninth grade academies, also the work we're doing around post-secondary planning. So it really is about creating the condition and the practice now so that when we do get to a conversation of high school of the future or start to build towards that and build towards an implementation, we have the structures and the systems in place. Also, in order to make that kind of a transition, we're going to need data to inform our future practice. And if there isn't an alignment in grading practices and how we're able to, and our schedules, and how we're able to surface that information through the data, then it makes it challenging in pushing that work forward for consolidation.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Bondo?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ali, for the presentation. And I have three questions. I think the first one is related to the proposal. I mean, not the proposal, but the idea to move to the different grading to be more equitable. So I'm just wonder how the combination for everything, are we going to combine the grade which represents the academic proficiency, I mean, what the student knows, and also with the behavior combining together, because sometimes we have grade from the proficiency for the academic proficiency and the behave come different grading systems. So are we going to combine both? So I'm asking if that way we can combine the academic proficiency, the behavior, and also the homework, because sometimes the homework being considered to be, it just depends if it's a practical aspect or can be considered also as a grading, entering to the grading system as well. Because I've been see that it has been a lot of equity gap around the grading on the homework. So I'm just wonder, the way we're moving to a more standards, are we going to incorporate on one, or is going to be just separately the way the traditional ways was?
That's a great question. I think that's actually one that the grading task force will tackle. And I think we're trying to approach it with a lens of there's a reason that our schools exist the way that they do, right? Like we want to assume that everyone got to where they were or are right now for a reason. And so I think really focusing this initial work, and part of the reason we want to start with a smaller group and that fact finding or artifact gathering is to really understand why are we doing this the way that we are, and why does it vary across buildings, and understand the why behind each building, and then try to find the commonality. Because I suspect that as folks talk about their why, we'll see the rationale that drove the original decisions.
Yeah. All right, perfect. Yes, I cannot wait. I can wait. I can wait to see that. And my second that is that the way we try to move that, how that new system may translate to the GPA for college access.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I do think what is exciting about this work is that we're bringing together sort of the practitioners, people who are thinking about the student experience, and then we'll have representation from the data team from that sort of technical lens of what does this look like numerically, or, how does it go into a technical system? And then I think, it'll be great to bring in people who have that post-secondary orientation, especially for college readiness, and thinking about, how does this then translate to colleges who are looking at these transcripts. So yes, that is certainly something that I think this group will have to tackle, and this is why it's going to be probably a long haul to get to a final decision. But we want to be really strategic about strategically engaging different stakeholders, but also not bringing too many voices in too quickly, because I think we have to really understand the what before we can dig into the how.
Okay. Yeah, it seems exciting. So I can, I would like to see that. So my last question is on the consistency, on the uniformity of the grading system, the way the task force is going to look at it, because we have a different categories of grading, right? We have different activities. We have also the IPs. We have the 504 requirement. So I just wonder the way everything will be aligned to make sure then we have that combination of everything when I see different categories on the way the grading, the way the traditional grading was. So I just want to see at what extent the uniformity will be aligning for those different areas, activities, IPs, 504 requirements.
I mean, Allison, or I mean, Jesse, you might also have opinions about this. I think, right, the idea is we're trying to come to a common scale so that we have a common language for how we talk about this work. But then the differentiation that goes into our instruction and the supports that students get, right, it's how do you ensure that they can meet the standard? But the standard is the standard, and we should have a common way of talking about proficiency. And so I think when you think about students with IEPs or 504s, right, that it's really about focusing on the instructional supports that they're getting so that they have the ability to meet that expectation of proficiency.
Thank you. And I just want to encourage, and I'm really in favor of that, moving this forward, and I will be watching this closely, because I think everything is coming to the communication, the way we are shifting the mindset for parents to understand exactly how, having that new system will be better off for all our students. So it's more equitable. Thank you so much for what you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, truly. Thank you, everyone. Haley and Allison and Jesse and all, for there is so much that you've offered this evening. I think, and a lot of clarity, and I think a lot of forward thinking, and it feels good.
And we'll be bringing more updates to the committee as we continue on in the process. And, as it's been echoed already, that, once we look at schedules, we're able to, the potential is that we will be aiming towards getting to a common grading practice. Once we get to a common grading practice, then we could really dig into the data, and then the data will tell us what types of conversations we need to have, training and development for staff, for example, just so that we can ensure our grading practices across the board are truly equitable and beneficial and aligned for students. Okay.
It's very ambitious. Well, if there's nothing else from the staff, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. before 9 o'clock.
I move.
Second? Okay, and all in favor? Please raise your hands. Thank you so very much this evening.
Yeah.
I appreciate all your work.
Thank
Good
you
night.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.